You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and it's Rapid Fire Thursday, the quick name I am giving this episode because I feel like we have missed out on some of the smaller stories as I have covered some breaking news in a longer format the last few episodes. So buckle up, and let's dive into 6 rapid-fire crime stories. First out of the gate, Haynesville, Alabama, where nearly a month ago, a grand jury indicted 5 police department officers and the wife of one of the officers following an investigation into the August 2024 death of dispatcher Christopher Michael Willingham. Now, the death seems to have uncovered a larger systemic problem within the police department. So, how big is Haynesville? You guys, it's teeny. That's the answer. About 3,200 people call home the entire county of Coleman, and Haynesville is located within that county. But it isn't truly, out in the middle of nowhere. Birmingham is just about an hour to the south of the small town, which means you can get to some big city amenities like more advanced medical care and a larger higher education system, but it is far enough away that your local services can have the potential of being less than stellar. And in this case, it seems the local police department has been compromised. Christopher, that's the dispatcher, well, he died in August of 2024 while on the job. He collapsed right there at his dispatcher desk. Most would have been led to believe that the 49-year-old potentially died from a massive heart attack or maybe a stroke. But once the results of an autopsy were released, it was understood that Christopher had ingested deadly quantities of drugs while on his shift. The pathology and toxicology reports listed his death as toxic results from a combination of fentanyl, gabapentin, diazepam, methamphetamine, carisoprodol, and methylcarbamol. And I'm sure I probably pronounced a couple of those wrong, but tons of toxic chemicals were in his body. Now that they understood why Christopher died, the next clear question was, how did he get the drugs? Well, the grand jury called to examine this case believes that Christopher was able to access the drugs in the department's evidence room. Now, don't go all CSI here in your imagination of this room. This evidence room is nothing more than a large broom closet, an about 10 by 10 foot room with a printer, a desk chair, an empty desk, boxes are on the floor, electrical panel on the cement wall, and get this, a hole in another wall, and a door that was almost always propped open with a broom. Coleman County DA Champ Crocker told reporters in a press conference that there was, quote, nothing secure about the evidence room, and that when Christopher Willingham was discovered dead, he had evidence from the evidence room at his desk. The DA then made the obvious leap that the drugs seized as evidence were readily available for a dispatcher to ingest. All right, let's go back to the grand jury. Because like I said, 6 people have been indicted and charged, but none of them have been charged with Christopher's death. Officer Cody Kelso and Officer Jason Wilbanks were charged with similar counts. Things like tampering with computer evidence, solicitation to commit a controlled substance crime, tampering with physical evidence, and use of an office for personal gain. Now, I read those charges as Officers Kelso and Wilbanks, well, they were potentially maybe selling the drugs and also tampering with the evidence to hide their misdeeds. So we've got 2 down, 4 more to go. Chief Jason Marlin was charged with tampering with physical evidence and not reporting a crime. Now, I read that as he knew that the bad behavior with the evidence that existed and should have been secured, well, that he did nothing about it, and he didn't secure it or protect his staff. Okay, now there's Officer William Shelnut, who tampered with physical evidence, and then there's Officer Eric Kelso. He's been charged with unlawful distribution of a controlled substance and conspiracy to distribute a controlled substance. So it seems Officer Eric Kelso is on the selling portion of this crime as well. And that leaves us just one more. the spouse of Officer Eric Kelso. Her name, Donna Reed Kelso. She is charged with the same crimes as her husband. And yes, 3 of the 6 have the last name Kelso. Do with that what you will. It's a small town. The department typically has around 9 LEOs. 5 were just fired due to those charges. That leaves the department on life support and a grand jury saying, scrap it all, gut the whole department. The 18-person grand jury felt the evidence room, the jail, the officers that were employed, the policies and procedures, basically all of it was substandard, calling it a, quote, rampant culture of corruption. The grand jury handed down the indictments and the 6 were charged in late February. And as of last week, the rest of the entire department, 12 other employees, were fired from their positions, and the Coleman County Sheriff's Department assumed the role of law enforcement for the small town. Now, the city agreed to pay the employees through this week, and they will also receive payment for any accrued vacation time. Their insurance benefits will terminate on April 1st. This isn't the first time this small town has experienced some form of corruption. In late 2023, Haynesville Mayor Kenneth Nell resigned after pleading guilty to 15 counts of using city employees, including police and also jail inmates, to do private work for him. He had been mayor since 2008. That's 15 years of potentially getting away with a free labor grift. Now, current plans do include restructuring and rebuilding that police department. Christopher, he's our dead dispatcher. It's clear he wasn't a perfect person, but he does deserve to be remembered. He was married to Patty and had 2 adult children, Josh and Caitlin, who are both married. He is the grandfather to 5 grandchildren. Hopefully, rodent bombing the entire department will be the solution to creating a trustworthy police force. I'm sure you guys have plenty of opinions about small town police forces. Let me know what you think in the comments. Now to Girl Scout cookies. Bet you didn't think that was the subject of our next crime story. But Moms Across America, that's a nonprofit organization dedicated to amplifying the voices of moms who want to create healthy communities. Well, they have filed a lawsuit against the Girl Scouts of America, claiming those delicious cookies are loaded with elevated levels of aluminum, arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury. According to the cited study, that's in all of the cookies offered by the Girl Scouts. And then there are 13 types of cookies that tested positive for high levels of glyphosate. Okay, that's a dangerous to humans herbicide used to kill weeds. Okay, but we might need to pump the brakes here. The study titled Danger in the Dough, Unveiling the Toxic Contaminants in Girl Scout Cookies, well, it's received criticism because it wasn't published by a scientific journal or peer-reviewed. Experts say the study was also of a small sample size, only about 25 cookies from each variety. And then the study compared heavy metals and glyphosate levels to the Environmental Protection Agency's water safety limits. Those aren't applicable for food. Because of this skepticism, the Girl Scouts of America has denounced the claims and has tried to reassure customers that their cookies are safe to consume and that those very delectable Samoas, well, they say they meet all regulations set by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and also the EPA. The suit has been filed in the New York federal system and is being spearheaded by Daniel Barbaro and Judy Chalua. Now, there are some big names behind the study. A veteran pediatrician, and a what some would call brilliant scientist who has more letters and degrees behind her name than I have time to mention here. However, both of those people sit on the board for Moms Across America. Now, back in 2024, the nonprofit group decided to target Banza chickpea pasta. Back then, they claimed that the product had dangerous levels of glyphosate, much like the 13 varieties of cookies. Jessica Steyer, she's the founder of the Unbiased Science podcast, Well, she did a deep dive on the Bonza pasta, and she debunked the claim about that chickpea pasta. Well, having tackled moms across America once before with the pasta gate, she's at it again. And when asked about the Girl Scout cookies, she spoke about the study's glyphosate level claims. Those claims state that the levels in several of the cookies were 334 times higher than what is harmful to consume. Well, that sounds super scary, right? However, Jessica said when analyzed, quote, the highest glyphosate level they found, which was 111 parts per billion, and that was in Thin Mints, well, that amount would require a child to consume over 9,000 cookies in a single day to approach even the most conservative safety thresholds. Now, when the CEO of Moms Across America was presented with this statistic, she responded by saying that she would hope that consumers still would be alarmed that any dangerous chemicals are in these cookies. And she also wished that the Girl Scouts of America would choose better ingredients based upon the information that's been supplied. So, that leaves us with the lawsuit. Civil suits take forever. We know that. But this suit is asking for $5 million in damages and also for the makers of the cookies to change their ingredients. As a side note, 2 Girl Scout cookie flavors are being discontinued after this 2025 cookie season. Those flavors are s'mores and the Toast Yay cookies. All right, the s'mores is self-explanatory, but the Toast Yay is a crunchy cookie that is supposed to taste like French toast. And guess which cookie is the most popular? If you said Thin Mints, you're right. They account for 25% of all sales. And Samoas, my personal favorite, are second. Let me know what you think of this story, and specifically, is $5 million an appropriate value for this lawsuit, especially when no one's died? And go ahead, tell me, what are your favorite cookies? Now to a story out of Clinton, Ohio, where a married couple have been charged with reckless, dependent adult abuse by a caregiver. Okay, that's not a charge we talk about often on Rise in Crime. This abuse was discovered back in August of 2024 when police were called to a home in Clinton to investigate the death of an elderly man. When officers arrived, they found 76-year-old Lavam Ha in a severe state of neglect. Physically, he looked horrible. His malnourished body was covered in bed sores, and maggots were present. Some of those sores on his body were so deep that the wound had eroded clear to his bone. When investigators started researching Lavam's medical record, they learned he weighed 186 pounds in 2021. In August of last year, when they removed his body for autopsy, he weighed just 102 pounds. Now, the autopsy also revealed that Lavam died from bronchial pneumonia that was complicated by a lung mass. His malnutrition and lack of care were listed as significant contributing factors. Medical experts determined that the level of dehydration and starvation in Lavam's body would have taken weeks, if not months, to develop. So, if these conditions had developed over weeks and led to his death, what were his caregivers doing? Well, nothing, apparently. The home where Lavan was found belongs to 36-year-old Justin Babers and 23-year-old Angelina Babers. The investigation determined that Justin was Lavam's primary caregiver. He should have been responsible for his medical needs, his nutrition, and his overall general well-being. In fact, he was being paid to care for Lavam. But Angelina told the investigators that Justin was gone for days at a time, which left Lavam in an unsanitary and unmonitored state. And investigators found evidence that backed up this statement: discarded soiled bed linens and a soiled mattress. And another resident of the home, who was also paying Justin for care, said Lavam's breathing had become increasingly labored, but no one in the home sought medical care for him. Angelina also admitted that Lavam had not been bathed in weeks. All of this is bad enough. But then Angelina told investigators that Justin altered the death scene before paramedics arrived. She said he changed the bedding, tidied up the room, repositioned Latham to look peaceful, all in an effort to cover up the neglect. Of course, the police were investigating, but they also got the Department of Health and Human Services involved. And both agencies came to the same conclusion. Justin and Angelina were responsible for the death of Latham. Now, the actual charge is, like I mentioned, intentional, reckless, dependent adult abuse by a caregiver resulting in death. That is a felony charge, but the potential sentence will be softer than, say, first-degree murder or some second-degree murder charges. Last week, when the charges were filed, we learned that Latham wasn't the only resident that had allegedly been neglected. Investigators returned to the home on the last day of February because someone else had called and requested a welfare check. Once inside on that visit, they found 2 more men in severe neglect. TV6 in Clinton is reporting that according to the warrants, a 49-year-old man with muscular dystrophy was found with his eyes locked open. He was shaking and emaciated. He was covered in oozing sores, and police said his body was twisted into an unnatural position. When he was removed from the bed, police say his imprint was left in the mattress because of the amount of grime and filth. They found a 65-year-old man in a separate room. That man had fallen a week earlier and hadn't been treated. When both those men were interviewed by investigators at the hospital, they each said they had been paying Justin $600 a month to stay in the house. The affidavit said that Justin claimed he was supporting 8 people and that he is self-employed and works about 15 hours a week. Justin, what's your side gig, buddy? Why are you gone for days at a time? Those are my looming questions. Also, I'm guessing the 2, Justin and Angelina, are married. Source materials don't specifically say, but they each have the same profile pic on Facebook. There are other pics of them together on their social media. Justin's profile says he is single, but they share the same surname. And those matching profile pics, well, they're from a post on February 18th with the caption, "First day of medical school." They were arrested 10 days later after that post. Who knows what's going on? Justin also has multiple excerpts from sermons posted on his page, and those seem to be very recent. Maybe he's finding God, or maybe he's rebranding. Both Angelina and Justin are out on bond. The charges as they currently stand could potentially land them in prison for up to 50 years, with parole possible at 35 years, but that's not likely. I'll watch this case and let you know how it proceeds. Now to Albuquerque, New Mexico. For me, home to the best blackened catfish that I have ever eaten. And I wish that was all I was reporting about that city. But I'm not, because some young boys are swirled up in an alleged hit-and-run accident that killed a 63-year-old cyclist. Now, this all happened last May, nearly a year ago. That's when Scott Habermel, a physicist who was riding his bike to work at the Sandia National Laboratory, well, he was hit from behind by an approaching vehicle. The collision caused Scott and his bike to careen over the hood of the car and off the passenger side of the vehicle. Scott was killed. And the boys driving the car and riding in the car, well, they fled the scene. And how? And why? And who? All of those questions were not answered until cops received a tip last month. And they now believe they have the who and the how. Police were sent a video that had been posted to Instagram. On the video, you can hear a 15-year-old boy say, "Just bump him, bruh." Then his 13-year-old buddy is shown driving the stolen car. The driver on the early morning Albuquerque street can then be heard asking, "Like bump him?" And then the 15-year-old allegedly says, "Yeah, just bump him. Go like 15, 20, meaning miles per hour. The 13-year-old, following the command of the 15-year-old who is in the backseat of the stolen car, accelerates the car toward the bicyclist. Allegedly, at this point, The video shows an 11-year-old boy in the front passenger seat waving a handgun and laughing as they hit Scott on his bicycle. Investigators then say you can hear loud sounds like metal flexing as Scott and his bike kaboom into the hood of the car. Well, last month, armed with the knowledge of who they believe the boys were in the video, police began investigating, and they realized a couple of these boys, the 13-year-old and the 11-year-old, so those are the two in the front seat, well, they've caused some issues before. They were already in trouble with the law and being investigated for other crimes, and their cell phones were in the possession of law enforcement. The detectives obtained new search warrants for the phones because they're looking for something different, and that's when they captured the full video of the crash. The three older boys can be charged with open murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and leaving the scene of an accident involving great bodily harm. Detectives say the 11-year-old is too young under New Mexico law to be charged with the murder. They are still yet to determine what they will charge that boy with. And I have to say boy. I can't even say teen because he's 11. As of Tuesday morning, cops had the 13-year-old boy in custody, but they were still looking for the two other suspects, the 12-year-old and the 15-year-old. Police are urging the 15-year-old to turn himself in, and the 12-year-old is currently listed as a missing person out of Torrance County. You guys, so much of these charges are unclear. Like, it's unclear if the other boy, the 15-year-old, will be charged as an adult, because according to the Interstate Commission for Juveniles, kids as young as 14 can have their case transferred from juvenile court to adult court. And then also to note, this crime seems completely random. They didn't even know Scott. Now, Scott's family told the Corrales Comment that their husband and father would make the 25-mile trek from his home to work and back on his bicycle every workday. His son, also named Scott, said that his father thoroughly enjoyed the ride. His obituary said the following: during his time at the National Lab, Scott produced over 50 journal publications and 6 patents, including some of the most groundbreaking work allowing for integrated circuits and memories to become radiation hardened. These are techniques that are still used to this day for national security and space applications. I'll be watching this case. Let me know what you think. And now to Tennessee, where police are searching for 4 people who allegedly robbed a convenience store. Okay, that's what I call a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Thursday in San Francisco because it's so frequent. But this one's different because the weapon to force the robbery was not a gun, it wasn't a knife, it wasn't even a bat. No, the robbers were holding pythons. 2 females and 2 males entered a Citgo truck stop in Denmark, Tennessee last week, and video footage shows each male holding a python. The clerks, scared of the snakes, and can you blame them? Well, they didn't do anything to stop the 4 from stealing about $400 worth of CBD oil. The clerks felt like the 4 would have stolen more goods if the truck stop hadn't been so crowded when they entered. Now, police are still looking for the thieves. They left the truck stop in a small gray or looks like maybe dark blue 4-door sedan that had a bungee cord attached to the trunk to hold it closed. You can call Crime Stoppers at 731-424-8477 if you have anything to offer to this case. But it got me thinking, this isn't the first snake-wielding robbery in Tennessee. Back in April of last year, 26-year-old Reginald Cook entered a Shell gas station and convenience store at around 2 a.m. He told the clerk he had a weapon, but he didn't show the weapon. So the clerk just looked at him and said, "Buzz off." That's probably the nice way of saying it. So Reginald left with no goods and no cash. Then about a half hour later, he tried again. Again, he didn't have a weapon. And the clerk again told him to buzz off. Just after 3 a.m., he gave it another shot, except this time, he had a 5-foot snake draped around his neck, and he was shouting demands for money. This time, the clerk was a little bit scared. Again, can you blame him? So instead of saying buzz off, the clerk pulled a gun in self-defense. Reginald fled the scene and was picked up or apprehended by police just a short time later. He was charged with 2 counts of aggravated robbery, and I couldn't find what happened to the snake. But if police pulled him over or stopped him on foot, it didn't say how they got to him, and that 5-foot snake was either in the car or still on his body, that takes protect and serve to a whole new level. And finally, a quick update to a story that I brought you on Rise and Crime back. This happened just after the Super Bowl. That's when Telemundo reporter Aiden Manzano was found dead in his hotel room, and 48-year-old Danette Colbert was seen on video entering and leaving that hotel room. Well, back in that story that I brought you, I told you about Danette's colorful past, where she had been accused of drugging and stealing from several men in both Las Vegas and New Orleans. Well, on Tuesday, Danette was charged with second-degree murder. Aiden's autopsy has revealed that he died as a result from the combined toxic effects of Xanax and alcohol. Those drugs, along with positional asphyxia, led to his death. The ME reported that Aiden was lying face down in his pillow, and that's why he could not breathe. Aiden's alcohol level was 0.232 at the time of his death. That's almost 3 times the legal limit. However, the autopsy did not identify if Aiden died by homicide. Police say that's not stopping them from charging Danette with his murder. One reason they feel that Danette is responsible is Aiden did not have a prescription for Xanax, but when Danette's apartment was searched, detectives found a similar drug that would produce the same results as Xanax on the preliminary toxicology reports. Danette was previously charged with robbery and fraud because she allegedly used Aiden's debit card to purchase items, and she was also allegedly found in possession of Aiden's cell phone. Danette remains in jail, and her bail is expected to increase. I'll keep you updated on this story as more comes out. Now to comments from Monday's episode. Thanks for all the birthday wishes. It was a wonderful day, and you guys made it even better. I wanted to highlight what Serena said on YouTube. All right, she's a nurse, and in her job, she has employed ways to calm people down. She felt the 911 operator in the quadruple homicide in North Idaho was a little bit hostile and potentially impatient. Kelly and Melissa and Faye said the same thing on Spotify. They felt that dispatcher could have accomplished the gathering of information with a softer tone. And I totally get that she could have been more patient. And that reminded me of something. Early on in the investigation, I had potentially theorized that the 911 call was going to make first responders look bad. And that was why it was taking so long to release. I was putting that as a potential because I absolutely feel like the university and the police looked bad when they came out so quickly, just hours after finding the bodies, and said that there was no threat to the public. And also, as I mentioned, I'm not sure this 911 call helps the state against Kohberger. I don't think it's going to do much for them. And as Lacey on YouTube said, let's choose compassion until we see what happens at trial. I think we're all going to have a little different perspective when the evidence is presented. And after that, we might actually be more critical of the police or of the dispatcher. Who knows? We're just going to have to watch. And thanks for the shout outs from Australia and Russia and England and Finland. You guys are amazing. Thanks so much for listening. That's your Thursday episode of Rise and Crime. Thank you for sending in the case suggestions. A couple of the ones that I covered today were suggestions that I received, so I really appreciate that. I love having this be an interactive podcast, so please keep sending them. And I would also appreciate if you shared this episode with a friend. It's a really great way to help the podcast grow. You can like and follow us on all of our social media accounts at Oh No Media. That's Murder with My Husband, Into the Dark, and of course, Rise and Crime. Join me again on Monday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules, and keep safe out there.